Welcome, my name is Alan and we are back with more Insurgent Mexico. Now, we are picking up with chapter 8. Try to remember my Roman numerals. But anyway, let's jump into this. The Five Musketeers. The Casa Grande de la Cadena had been sacked, of course, by Cheche Campa the year before. In the patio were corralled the officers' horses. We slept on the tiled floors of the rooms surrounding it. In the sala of the owner, once barbarically decorated, pegs were driven into the walls to hang saddles and bridles on. Rifles and sabers were stacked against the walls, and dirty blanket rows lay flung into the corner. At night, a fire of corn cobs was built in the middle of the floor, and we squatted around it, while Apolinario, the 14-year-old Gil Tomas, who was once a Colorado, told stories of the bloody 3 years. At the taking of Durango, the Apolinario, I was of the gente of Captain Borunda. He that they call the Matador, because he always shoots his prisoners. But when Urbina took Durango, there weren't any prisoners. So Borunda, thirsty for blood, made the rounds of all the saloons. And in every one he would pick out some unarmed man and ask him if he were a federal. "No, senor," the man would say. "You deserve death because you have not told the truth," yelled Borunda, pulling his gun. Bang! We all laughed heartily at this. That reminds me, broke in Gil, of the time I fought with Rojas in Orozco's, cursed be his mother, Revolucion. An old Porfirista officer deserted to our side, and Orozco sent him out to teach the Colorados animals how to drill. There was one droll fellow in our company. Oh, he had a fine sense of humor. He pretended that he was too stupid to learn the manual of arms. So his cursed old Huertista, may he fry in hell, made him drill alone. Shoulder arms, the compañero said, did it all right. Present arms, perfectly. Port arms, he acted like he didn't know how, so the old fool went around and took hold of the rifle. "This way," says he, pulling on it. "Oh," says the fellow, "that way." And he let him have the bayonet right in the chest. After that, Fernando Silveira, the paymaster, recounted a few anecdotes of the curios, or priest, that sounded exactly like Touraine in the 13th century, and the feudal rights of landlords over their women tenants before the French Revolution. Fernando ought to have known, too, for he was brought up for the church. There must have been about 20 of us sitting around that fire, and the way from the most miserably poor peon in the tropa up to First Captain Longina Guereca. There wasn't one of these men who had any religion at all, although once they had all been strict Catholics. But 3 years of war have taught the Mexican people many things. There will never be another Porfirio Diaz. There will never be another Orozco Revolution. And the Catholic Church in Mexico will never again be the voice of God. Then Juan Santillanes, a 22-year-old subteniente, who seriously informed me that he was descended from the great Spanish hero Gil Blas, piped up in the ancient disreputable ditty which begins, I am Count Oliveros of the Spanish artillery. Juan proudly displayed 4 bullet wounds. He had killed a few defenseless prisoners with his own gun, he said, giving promise of growing up to be muy matador, a great killer someday. He boasted of being the strongest and bravest man in the army. His idea of humor seemed to be breaking eggs into the pocket of my coat. Juan was very young for his years, but very likable. But the best friend I had beside Gino Guereca was Subteniente Luis Martinez. They called him Gachupine, the contemptuous name for Spaniards, because he might have stepped out of a portrait of some noble Spanish youth by Greco. Louis was pure race, sensitive, gay, and high-spirited. He was only 20 and had never been in battle. Around the contour of his face was a faint black beard. He fingered it, grinning. Nicanor and I made a bet that we wouldn't shave until we took Torreon. Luis and I slept in different rooms, but at night, when the fire had gone out and the rest of the fellows were snoring, we sat at each other's blankets one night in his cuartel and one next to mine, talking about the world, our girls, and what we were going to be and to do when we really got at it. Then when the war was over, Luis was coming to the United States to visit me, and then we were coming back to Durango City to visit the Martinez family. He showed me the photograph of a little baby, proudly boasting that he was an uncle already. What will you do when the bullets begin to fly? I asked him. Quien sabe? He laughed. I guess I'll run. It was late. The sentinel at the door had long since gone to sleep. Don't go, said Luis, grabbing my coat. Let's gossip a little longer. Gino, Juan Santillanes, Silveira, Luis, Juan Vallejo, and I rode up the Arrojo to bathe in the pool that was rumored to be there. It was a scorched riverbed filled with white-hot sand, rimmed with dense mesquite and cactus. Every kilometer the hidden river showed itself for a little space, only to disappear at a crackling white run of alkali. First came the horse pull. The troopers and their wretched ponies gathered around it, one or two squatting in the on the rim, scooping water up against the animal's sides with calabashes. Above them kneeled the women at their eternal laundry on the stones. Beyond that, the ancient path from the hacienda cut across, where the never-ending line of black-shawled women moved the water jars on their heads. Still farther up were women bathers, wrapped around and round with yards of pale blue or white cotton, and naked brown babies splashing in the shallows. And last of all, naked brown men with sombreros and bright-colored serapes draped over their shoulders smoked their ollas, squatting on the rocks. We flushed a coyote up there and scrambled steeply up to the desert, pulling at our revolvers. There he went. We spurred into the chaparral on a dead run, shooting and yelling. But of course, he got away. And later, much later, we found the mythical pool, a cool, deep basin worn in the solid rock with green weeds growing on the bottom. When we got back, Gino Guereca became greatly excited because his new Tordillo horse had come from Bruquilla, a 4-year-old stallion that his father had raised for him to ride at the head of the company. If he is dangerous, announced Juan Santillanes as he hurried out, I want to ride him first. I love to subdue dangerous horses. A mighty cloud of yellow dust filled all the corral, rising high into the still air, though it appeared the dim chaotic shapes of many running horses. Their hoofs made dull thunder. Men were vaguely visible. All braced legs and swinging arms, handkerchiefs bound over their faces, wide-spreading rope coils lifted, circling. The big gray felt the loop tighten on his neck. He trumpeted and plunged. The vaquero twisted the rope around his hip, lying back almost to the ground, feet plowing the dirt. Another noose gripped the horse's hind leg, and he was down. They put a saddle on him and a rope halter. Want to ride him, Juanitos? Grinned Gino. After you, answered Juan with dignity. He's your horse. But Juan Vallejo already was astride, shouting to them to loose the ropes. With a sort of squealing roar, the Tordillo struggled up, and the earth trembled to his furious fight. We dined in the ancient kitchen of the hacienda, sitting on stools around a packing box. The ceiling was a rich, greasy brown from the smoke of generations of mills. One entire end of the room was taken up by immense adobe stoves, ovens, and fireplaces with 4 or 5 ancient crones bending over them, stirring pots and turning tortillas. The fire was our only light, flickering strangely over the old woman, lighting up the black wall, up which the smoke fled, to wreathe around the ceiling and finally pour from the window. There were Colonel Petronio, his mistress, a strangely beautiful peasant woman with a pockmarked face, who always seemed to be laughing to herself about something. Don Tomas, Luis Martinez, Colonel Redondo, Major Salazar, Nicanor, and I. The colonel's mistress seemed uncomfortable at the table, for a Mexican peasant woman is a servant in her house, but Don Petronio always treated her as if she were a great lady. Redondo had just been telling me about the girl he was going to marry. He showed me her picture. She was even then on her way to Chihuahua to get the wedding dress. As soon as we take Torreon, he said. Oiga, Senor Salazar touched me on the arm. I have found out who you are. You are an agent of American businessmen who have vast interest in Mexico. I know all about American business. You are an agent of the trusts. You come down here to spy upon the investment of our troops, and then you will secretly send them word. Is it not true? How could I secretly send anybody word from here? I asked. We're 4 days' hard ride from a telegraph line. Ah, I know, he grinned cunningly, wobbling his finger at me. I know many things. I have much in the head. He was standing up now. The major suffered badly from gout. His legs were wrapped in yards and yards of woolen bandages, which made him look like tamales. I know all about business. I have studied much in my youth. These American trusts are invading Mexico to rob the Mexican people. You're mistaken, Major, interrupted Don Petronio Nilo sharply. This senor is my friend and my guest. Listen, mi coronel. Salazar burst out with unexpected violence. This senor is a spy. All Americans are porfiristas and huertistas. Take this warning before it is too late. I have much in the head. I am a very smart man. Take this gringo out and shoot him at once, or you will regret it. A clamor of voices burst out all together from the others, but it was interrupted by another sound, a shot, and then another, and men shouting. Came a trooper running. Mutiny in the ranks, he cried. They won't obey orders. Who won't? Snapped Don Petronio Nilo. The gente of Salazar. Bad people, exclaimed Nicanor as we ran. They were Colorados captured when we took Torreon. Joined us so we wouldn't kill them. Ordered out tonight to guard the puerta. Till tomorrow, said Salazar at this point. I'm going to bed. The peons' houses at La Cadena were where the troops were quartered enclosed a great square. Like a walled town, there were 2 gates. At one we forced our way through a mob of women and peons fighting to get out. Inside there was a dim lights from doorways and 3 or 4 little fires in the open air. A bunch of frightened horses crowded one another in a corner. Men ran wildly in and out of their quartels with rifles in their hands. In the center of the open space stood a group of about 50 men, mostly armed as if to repel an attack. "Guard those gates," cried the colonel. "Don't let anybody out without an order from me." The running troops began to mass at the gates. Don Petronilo walked out alone into the middle of the square. "What's the trouble, compañeros?" he asked quietly. "They were going to kill us all," yelled somebody from the darkness. "They wanted to escape. They were going to betray us to the Colorados." "It's a lie," cried those in the center. "We are not Don Petronilo's gente. Our jefe is Manuel Arrieta." Suddenly Longinos Guerreca, unarmed, flashed by us and fell upon them furiously, wrenching away their rifles and throwing them far behind. For a moment it looked as if the rebels would turn on them, but they did not resist. "Disarm them," ordered Don Petronilo, "and lock them up." They herded the prisoners into one large room with an armed guard at the door, and long after midnight I could hear them hilariously singing. That left Don Petronilo with 100 effectives, some extra horses, and with running sores on their backs, and 2,000 rounds of ammunition, more or less. Salazar took himself off in the morning after recommending that all his gente be shot. He was evidently greatly relieved to be rid of them. Juan Santillanes was in favor of execution too, but Don Petronilo decided to send them to General Urbina for trial. So yeah, we have an outbreak where former soldiers for the other side finally rose up and said, "Enough! We do not take, orders from such and such. We obey." Yeah. So, they are locked up. They are executed. But yeah, our reporter notes this. He's like, "Okay, this is what we see. Blah, 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 blah." Yeah. It is interesting. And so, yeah. We end that particular report with, like I said, those particular soldiers locked up. But that will be the end of that episode. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.